"Your wife isn't family," Mom said, removing her name from the group chat. "We'd been married 11 years. Blood only." My sister liked the message. I replied, "Noted." That night, my wife and I looked at each other and just started laughing. See? What they didn't know. My wife's family owns the vineyard where we were hosting Thanksgiving. I called my mother-in-law. Small favor? When my family showed up on Thanksgiving Day. It was 9:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the only light in our kitchen came from the stove clock in my wife's phone screen. The group chat was called Thanksgiving at Liam's, in all caps because my mother liked to pretend enthusiasm was the same thing as gratitude. I watched my wife, Claire, scroll, her thumb moving slow, like she didn't want the next line to exist. Then it did. "Mom, your wife isn't family. Removing her from this chat." A second later, the system message popped up. "Claire has been removed," and then, like a small, sharp nail tapped into the wood of my ribs, my sister Paige reacted with a thumbs up. Not even words, just approval. A clean little stamp. Claire didn't make a sound, she just stared at the screen like she'd been slapped with something invisible. I sat at the table in my work jeans, still smelling like hay and diesel from the ranch, and felt my throat tighten in that old familiar way. Like my body remembered every time I'd been told to swallow my feelings and call it being mature. My name is Liam. I was 36 then. I owned a small ranch outside town. More dirt under my nails than money in my pocket most years, but it was mine. And in my family, I'd always been the easy one, the one who didn't need much, the one who could handle it. I picked up my phone, opened the chat, and typed exactly what I felt. Me. Noted. That was all. No fight, no paragraphs, no begging them to explain their cruelty as if it was a misunderstanding. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair. For 3 seconds, the kitchen was silent. X! For 3 seconds, the kitchen was silent, except for the distant hum of our old fridge. Then Claire looked at me. I looked at her. And something slipped. Not broke, slipped. We started laughing. Not cute laughter. Not "this is awkward" laughter. The kind of laughter that comes when your brain finally gives up trying to make something make sense. Claire covered her mouth with her hand. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes. But she still laughed, shaking her head like she couldn't believe we were living in a story this stupid. "Blood only," she whispered, tasting the words like poison. "After 11 years. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I guess I should have put blood only on the invitation next to the turkey clip art," I said. She laughed harder, and then I did too. And for a moment it felt like we weren't being rejected. It felt like we were finally seeing the truth. Because here was the thing my family didn't know, because they never bothered to ask anything about Claire that didn't relate to what they could get from her. Claire's family owned the vineyard where we were hosting Thanksgiving. Not "we rented it," not "we borrowed it," owned. Her mother had built that place from nothing but stubbornness and sunburn and debt. Rows of vines like green veins across the hill, a tasting room that smelled like oak and citrus, an event barn with white string lights and polished concrete floors. Claire had grown up there. I proposed there under the oldest vine on the property, the one they called the grandmother. We were hosting Thanksgiving at the vineyard because Claire's family loved people, real people, the kind who said thank you, the kind who noticed effort. My family saw the vineyard as a backdrop for photos, a free venue, a brag. They'd been calling it Liam's Fancy Thanksgiving, like I'd won it in a raffle. And now my mother had said the quiet part out loud. "Your wife isn't family, blood only." I squeezed Claire's fingers. "Hey," I said softly. "You okay?" She exhaled, and the laughter faded into something steadier. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm just impressed. Like, it takes effort to be that disrespectful." I nodded. Then I stood up, walked to the counter, and picked up my phone again. Claire watched me, calm now, like she already knew the version of me that came after a line got crossed. I scrolled to a contact I didn't call often, not because we weren't close, but because Claire's mother didn't hover. She trusted us to handle our own lives. Marlene Dupree. My mother-in-law answered on the second ring. "Liam," she said, voice warm like a blanket. Everything okay? I looked at Claire. She raised her eyebrows like, do it! I swallowed once, feeling something settle into place. Hi, Marlene, I said. Small favor? There was a pause, not suspicious, just attentive. I'm listening, she said. I stared at the group chat again, at my mother's message, at Paige's thumbs up, and I spoke slowly, carefully, like I was reading terms out loud so nobody could claim they didn't understand. My family decided tonight that Claire isn't family, I said. They removed her from the Thanksgiving chat. They said blood only. Silence on the line? Not awkward silence. The kind of silence that means someone just turned their full body toward the problem. Then Marlene said, very calmly, okay. That was it. Not, oh, honey, not are you sure, not maybe she didn't mean it. Just, okay, she understood. I kept going. Thanksgiving is at the Vineyard, I said. They're still planning to show up. They're acting like they can treat my wife like a stranger and still eat at your family's table. Claire's mouth twitched like she wanted to laugh again, but her eyes were sharp. Marlene took a quiet breath. Do you want them there? She asked. I looked around our kitchen. The chipped wood table we'd refinished ourselves, the boot prints on the mat by the door, Claire's cardigan draped over the chair like it belonged. I thought about 11 years of marriage, and 36 years of being told to keep the peace. No, I said. I don't. Then they won't be, Marlene replied, like she was confirming a reservation. My chest loosened in a way I didn't realize it had been tight for years. Marlene continued, still calm. Tell me what you need. I stared out our window at the dark line of the pasture. I need it to be clean, I said. Legal. No yelling, no drama, just boundaries. Perfect, she said. Boundaries are my favorite kind of decoration. Claire let out a quiet snort, half laugh, half relief. Marlene's tone stayed gentle, but there was steel under it. I'll handle the venue side, she said. Guest list, access, staff. And Liam? Yeah. If anyone asks, she said, the Vineyard is hosting Thanksgiving for family. Claire is my family, I said. I know, Marlene replied. That's why this is easy. When I hung up, Claire stared at me for a long second. Then she got up, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around my waist. Her hair smelled like rosemary shampoo. You didn't hesitate, she murmured into my shirt. I've hesitated my whole life, I said. I'm tired. She pulled back enough to look at my face. Are you scared? She asked. I thought about my mother's voice, the way she could turn guilt into a leash. I thought about Paige's thumbs up like my wife's existence was a nuisance. And I felt something new. Not rage, clarity. No, I said. I'm done. By Wednesday morning, my phone was buzzing like a trapped insect. Mom called twice before 8, then Paige texted, Paige, why are you being weird? It was just a group chat. A minute later, Paige, Mom's stressed. Don't make Thanksgiving difficult. That line made me smile, slow and cold. Because in my family, I had always been the one responsible for making things not difficult. When Paige wanted a horse in high school, my parents found the money like it fell from the sky. When I wanted help fixing the fence line after a storm, Dad told me, you're a man. Handle it. When Claire and I got married, my mother made a toast that was 80% about how hard it was for her to share her son. And when we bought the ranch, she asked if we'd thought about how far it is for the family, like my life should be arranged around their convenience. You're independent, Mom used to say with a proud smile. You don't need as much. What she meant was, you won't fight us. This time I didn't answer. Claire and I went to the vineyard that afternoon. The sun was low, turning the vines gold like they'd been brushed with fire. The event barn looked exactly the same as it always did. White beams, long wooden tables, linen runners folded neat. But something about it felt different now, like it belonged to us in a way it hadn't yesterday. Marlene met us near the tasting room, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, clipboard in hand like she was about to run a wedding. She hugged Claire first, tight and quiet. Then she hugged me. You good? she asked. I nodded. Better than I thought I'd be. Good, she said, and tapped the clipboard. Here's how this works. She showed us a printed list of names. Clean, typed, black ink. At the top it said, Thanksgiving Family List. Below it were names I recognized. Claire's cousins, her aunt, her grandparents, a few close friends from town who'd become part of our orbit over the years. And then, lower down, the names that mattered now. Liam Carter, Claire Carter. That was it from my side. Marlene looked at me. They said blood only, she reminded me, voice neutral. Right, I said. So, she continued, your wife is blood to me, which means you're blood too. Her lips curved slightly. Your mother and sister are not on this property's guest list. That's not personal. That's policy. Claire leaned into my shoulder. I felt her breathe out, long and grateful. Marlene walked us through it like a contract. The front gate would be staffed. Anyone not on the list would be turned away politely. If they argued, staff would repeat one line. This is a private event. You are not on the guest list. If they escalated, security would step in. No one would be touched. No one would be shouted at. Everything would be documented. It was the kind of consequence my family hated most. Not emotional, administrative. Marlene looked at Claire. Sweetheart, she said softly, I'm sorry they tried to shrink you. Claire swallowed, eyes glassy for a second. I'm okay, she said. I just didn't expect it to be that obvious. When people show you who they are, she said, believe them the first time. Then she looked at me again. And Liam? She added, you're not taking their calls, that's good. But you should send one message. I hesitated. Claire squeezed my hand. Marlene's voice stayed steady. One message? Clear. Factual. No debate. So that night, I typed a single text in the family chat they'd tried to use as a weapon. Me. Thanksgiving plans have changed. Please make other arrangements. Mom replied instantly. Mom, excuse me? Paige. What are you talking about? We already told everyone it's at the Vineyard. Mom, Liam, do not do this. This is family. I stared at that word on my screen. Family. The word they used like a key, like a debt, like a leash. I didn't answer, because the truth was simple. If Claire wasn't family, then neither was I. Thanksgiving morning came cold and bright. On the ranch, I fed the horses early just to keep my hands busy. The air smelled like frost and feed grain and damp earth. Claire made coffee in a thermos and packed pies we'd baked the night before. We drove to the vineyard in silence, not heavy silence, focused silence, the kind you get before a storm that you didn't cause but you're done running from. When we arrived, the property looked like a postcard, vines stretching out under a pale blue sky. The barn doors open, string lights glowing even in daylight like someone had decided warmth was a choice. Claire's family was already there, laughing, carrying trays, hugging, kids running between tables like little meteors. Her uncle waved at me from across the barn and shouted, "Ranch man!" I waved back, and for a second my chest ached, not from pain, but from the strange realization that I knew what it felt like to be welcomed without conditions. Claire's grandmother kissed my cheek and told me I looked too skinny. I told her the horses were to blame. She patted my arm and said, "Then eat more." It was so normal it almost made me angry all over again, realizing how easy kindness could be. Around noon, the first car pulled up to the gate. I didn't see it from the barn, but I knew the moment it happened because my phone started buzzing in my pocket like it was afraid. Mom calling. I didn't answer. A minute later, Paige. I didn't answer. Then a text from Mom. Mom, we're at the gate. Tell them to open it. Don't embarrass us. Claire stood next to me, holding a serving spoon like a small weapon. She read the text over my shoulder. Her eyes met mine. And then, because life has a twisted sense of timing, we both smiled. Not happy smiles, knowing smiles. I typed one line back. Me, you're not on the guest list. Claire covered her mouth and let out a quiet laugh. Almost fond. Like of course they'd think embarrassment mattered more than their behavior. Minutes later, another text came through. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're choosing her over your own mother? I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. 11 years of marriage reduced to her, like Claire was an object, a phase, a hobby. I felt Claire's hands slide into mine. "I'm not choosing," I typed. "I'm respecting your rule. Blood only." That's when Mom stopped texting and started calling again. I let it ring. In the distance, out past the barn, I heard faint voices carried by the wind. I didn't have to imagine the scene. I'd lived versions of it my whole life. My mother outraged, my sister backing her up, both of them shocked that the quiet one had a spine. Marlene walked into the barn like she'd just stepped out of an office meeting. She didn't look stressed. She didn't look angry. She looked prepared. "Gate situation?" Claire asked. Marlene nodded once. Handled. "Are they yelling?" I asked. "A little," Marlene said. "But your mother is learning that volume isn't a key." Claire's grandfather leaned in from behind us, hearing enough to piece it together. He didn't ask for gossip. He just said, "If anyone disrespects my granddaughter, they don't eat my food." Then he walked away to carve the turkey like the matter was settled by gravity. 15 minutes later, Paige's name lit my phone again. This time a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need her version of reality in my ears. Instead, I stepped outside the barn for air. The sun was higher now, warming the gravel under my boots. I walked far enough that the laughter inside became a soft blur. And then I saw them, through the fence line near the gate. My mother's face red with fury. Paige standing beside her, arms crossed, mouth tight. My father in the background, looking at the ground like he always did when Mom was on a mission. They were arguing with the gate staff, who stood calm and still, repeating one sentence like a prayer. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw my mother's hand gestures. Sharp, entitled. Paige pointed toward the barn like she could force doors open with her finger. Then my mother looked up and saw me. For a second, her face did something strange. It flickered, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or attack. Then she marched closer to the fence. "Liam!" she shouted, loud enough that a few birds lifted off the vines. I didn't move. I didn't hurry. I just walked to the fence line and stopped a few feet away, close enough to hear, far enough to stay safe. "You are humiliating us," Mom hissed, like the worst crime was being seen without control. "You humiliated Claire," I said. Quiet. She blinked, like she couldn't compute that the conversation included my wife as a person. Paige jumped in. "Oh my God, Liam, it was a group chat. Mom was upset. You're being dramatic." I looked at my sister, my adult sister, who had liked a message that said my wife wasn't family. "You liked it," I said. Paige scoffed. "It was a thumbs up. It means nothing." "It meant agreement," I replied. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Are you really doing this on Thanksgiving?" I let that hang in the air. Then I said, "You did it first." Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. Her voice softened slightly, but I knew the trick. I'd grown up with it. "Liam," she said, "you're my son. You don't turn your back on blood." I held her gaze. "You said blood only," I reminded her, "so I'm honoring that." Paige laughed once, sharp. "So what? We just don't get Thanksgiving now." The entitlement in that sentence almost took my breath away. Not "we're sorry," not "we didn't realize," just "what about our meal?" I nodded toward the road. Calm. "There are restaurants in town," I said. "Make a reservation." Mom's face went white. "How could you?" she whispered. "After all we've done for you." I almost laughed, because what they'd done for me was mostly teach me how to survive without them. I kept my voice even. "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm informing you." For a second, nobody spoke. Then Mom's eyes darted past me toward the barn, where laughter floated out through the open doors. She saw Claire's family moving together like a real unit. And in that moment, I saw something in her expression that looked almost like fear. Not fear of losing me emotionally. Fear of losing access. Of losing the version of me that existed to serve the family narrative. She tried one last angle. "Tell Claire to come talk to me." she snapped, like my wife was an employee. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just said, no. One word. Simple. Final. Then I turned and walked back toward the barn. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I heard my mother shout my name again, but it sounded distant now, like a radio in another room. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me. Oven heat, spice, wine, butter, people. Claire saw me immediately. She didn't ask what happened. She just reached for my hand under the table and squeezed twice. I squeezed back, and we sat down to eat. Not as a statement, as a life. A few months later, the messages changed. They always do, when people realize control isn't working. Mom texted like nothing had happened. Mom, are you free Sunday? We should do dinner. Paige tried a different approach. Paige, can we just move on? This is exhausting. No apology, no accountability. Just the expectation that I'd return to the role that made their lives convenient. Claire and I were home on the ranch when those messages came in. Mud on my boots, her hair pinned back while she labeled jars of homemade jam. The house smelled like wood smoke and vanilla. We had our own routines now, our own quiet, our own table. I stared at the phone a long moment. Then I set it face down. Claire glanced over. You going to answer? I thought about that empty place in the group chat, about blood only, about the Vineyard gate. I exhaled slowly. No, I said, not unless they learn what family actually is. Claire smiled, soft and tired and proud all at once. Okay, she said. Then come taste this. I think I nailed the cinnamon. I walked to her, wrapped my arms around her from behind, and tasted the spoon she held up. It was warm and sweet, and it tasted like a life that didn't require me to be smaller. Outside, the pasture stretched open and honest under the winter sky, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a seat at someone else's table. I'd built my own, and this time, the guest list made sense.